So when I first moved into talent, and especially as I was focusing on the people analytics side of it, really with an operational lens, I was curious when people started talking about workforce planning versus headcount planning versus org design. Coming from business school, we do a lot of org design work. We actually don't necessarily go into the depths of actually how do all these things tie together. So one of the things I wanted to do this week is to talk through a framework that's going to help you to connect all three together and really help to avoid one of the biggest challenges that we see, which is HR, finance, and the business not necessarily speaking the same language. So I'm hoping this framework is going to be quite helpful. By the end of this video, you should have an overall idea of what defines workforce planning, how it differs from headcount planning and organizational design, and actually how to implement a four-step process yourself so that you can actually use this in your organization. So we know one of the biggest problems that a lot of HR and people analytics teams face is everyone having their own version of a spreadsheet. So finance has one spreadsheet that generally the financial planning and analysis team, FP&A, and essentially what they're looking is what is the budget for the year ahead? What does our revenue look like? What does our cost look like? And are we actually going to have enough money to cover everything based on the current assumptions? And generally, they'll do different scenario modeling. So often you'll find there are different versions of this same spreadsheet. HR often looks backwards. How many people did we hire last year? Who left? What was the tenure of the people that left? And from that, we maybe can infer the projected headcount for the future. And quite often, headcount planning will incorporate some of that process. But quite often, it's a backwards looking accounting process where we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And then finally, the business will have their own version of a spreadsheet. They generally have high level business goals that they're trying to achieve. And often, what we'll find is that they generally make a bunch of assumptions in how they're going to achieve those goals, whether that's redistributing current headcount across different regions or across different product lines, maybe going through a big hiring surge earlier in the year to hit revenue goals. And so quite often it's important to make sure that all three of these tie together. But what we find is that they're often not, which means we miss budgets, we miss hiring targets, and managers actually don't know what's coming ahead. It's one of the biggest complaints that we actually hear as we think about headcount planning processes. So what is the solution? Well, there are three main tools that you can use. And if you didn't have any additional background, you may get confused as to how to incorporate all three of these together. So we have org design, workforce planning, and headcount planning as the three main ones. The way I like to think about it is kind of this pyramid, this stack. Now, normally what you would do as a business leader is maybe go straight to the org design and say, okay, this is the organization I think I need in order to hit my goals. But my argument is that's actually backwards. What we want to do is start off with workforce planning. And then from there, we know what skills we're going to need to achieve the business goals, really at a very high level. We go into headcount planning, which is, okay, well, how many people do we need? When do we need them in place? What is that going to cost us? And then finally, the org design. Okay, given this many people, how do we actually structure that into the right teams? And so it's very, very kind of top down. But my argument is that everyone in the process needs to be involved in this, really from the frontline managers all the way up to the C-suite. And it really starts with workforce planning. As I said, this is the foundation of this pyramid. And that's really, if you think about workforce planning, this is the strategy, the long-term vision, and actually how we're going to implement the processes to achieve the goals that we want to hit. And let's say, for example, we want to launch a new product. I purposely haven't put any dates on this, but let's say it's a year in the future. We say, okay, we need a new product launch a year from now in order to capture this new market. So we look at today, we say, okay, well, in order to hit that product launch, I'm actually going to need to hire some more engineers. Let's say 5 engineers need to be hired in order to build the team out and build that new product that's going to launch 12 months from now. So what's then needed actually after the product launch? Well, you're going to need a customer support team that's trained to advise on that product. Otherwise, that's not going to be successful. This is a very simplistic view. And actually, you're going to have a much bigger team requirements for this new product, but be really simple and say, you need software engineers to build it and we need customer support agents to support it once it's launched. This is our workforce strategy. Next, we actually go into the headcount planning phase of things where we're saying, okay, given that, what does this actually look like in practice? And this is where scenario modeling can be really helpful when you think about different assumptions that you can make and the trade-offs between these different assumptions. So we're not going to go into deep templates today, but let's say we're thinking about these roles that we're going to hire. We're thinking about planned start dates, salaries. And what we can start to then do is look at the monthly cost of hiring. And so in this scenario, we're a year out from this product launch. We can maybe say, okay, what happens if we hire these people in the first quarter? What happens if we hire them in the third quarter? How does that impact the overall budget? And so you can see in Q1, if we made all these hires in Q1, we're now thinking of a $50,000 payroll expense. This is not hiring everyone in January. If you see in any of the other videos I've done, we know that we kind of actually want to stagger the hiring process out. But if we have a plan start in January, February, and March, weighted average of those 10,000 a month salaries means we're actually paying $50,000 for the whole quarter. If we defer these to Q3, we actually don't have to pay anything in Q1. And so as HR, as the business is actually talking to finance and we're trying to project what impact does this have to the budget, we can then start to think about the trade-offs that we need to make. Maybe we only need to hire the software engineers in Q2 and the customer support engineers don't need to be hired until Q4 so that they can be trained just as the product's going to market. And this way you're actually balancing the cost out over the course of the year. This is how headcount planning comes into it. Once you've got that headcount plan locked in, then you can start to think about the organizational design structure. So in this example, very silly example, but let's say, okay, we're going to have 5 new engineers join in and they're all going to report to the CTO. We know that's never going to happen unless it's a very small organization. Generally, the CTO is managing very senior level folks, VP of IT, VP of software engineering, VP of backend engineering. So you're going to have very senior leaders reporting into the CTO through a round of negotiation and involving all of the key decision makers. Maybe you come up with a better solution where they, okay, well, instead of hiring just 5 software engineers, maybe we think about the team and how it's going to develop over time. And so maybe we have an engineering manager who's going to lead this team. And that could even be the first person that we hire in order for them to be able to actually build the team out that they're going to need. That person maybe reports into the CTO if this is a key initiative and the CTO wants direct line of sight. And maybe you're essentially growing this person into a senior leader over time. So there's some of the things that you maybe want to look at when you're scoping the role. This is where org design and recruiting actually go hand in hand because you're thinking not just who do I need right now, but what does the long-term plan look like? And then from here, again, we say, well, we don't just need 5 junior level engineers. Maybe we need someone who's a little bit more experienced because as we think about succession planning, this engineering manager moves into a senior role. The experienced engineer moves into the engineering management role. And then we can start to think about how this organization develops over time. And so this is actually going to really change the assumptions that we made in the last exercise when we went through headcount planning in terms of the actual cost and the hiring timelines and everything else. And so you can see how once we get to this stage, we're not just going to do one pass through and finish. We actually then have to go back and revisit the headcount planning stage. And that changes the recruiting plan and then changes the expectations. And so once we've gone through maybe a few rounds of this back and forth, we actually come up with a solid plan. But then we want to review that back to the workforce plan that we made initially and the long-term strategy and say, okay, given this plan, do we still believe we can launch the product 12 months from now? Do we still believe we're going to have everything in place in order to support the product once it's been launched? There's a lot to do as you go through this process. A few things to watch out for, reasons that this could fail are, one is you don't actually have finance, HR, and the business all in one room or all working off the same spreadsheet. Everyone runs their own plan and they don't talk to each other and they're using different assumptions. And so this is going to fall apart. If you only do annual planning, and so let's say you do this and it's Q4 and you come up with this great plan for the next year, and then Q1, the business assumption changes. If you're still working on Q4 assumptions, then whatever plan you put in place is going to be irrelevant. So many companies don't update their plans periodically. And so by Q3, you realize that you've overhired or the new product isn't going to gain the traction that you want, or maybe the company needs to go in a different direction. All of a sudden you have to lay off this team. Maybe you could do some restructuring, and that delays everything as part of the process. And so it's a really good idea to maintain this plan, keep everyone working from, again, the same assumptions, the same kind of core sheet, so that you can constantly revisit and make sure that you're still working towards the same end goal. Finally, the org structure might be ignored until it's too late. But if you come up with this grand plan, you create this really great headcount plan, and then you go and execute, then you hire 5 junior engineers and realize there's no one to manage them, or you have no succession plan when someone in a more senior level leaves the organization, all of a sudden you haven't really built in the resilience to your overall plan. So not considering the org structure, the broader org structure that may be impacted by hiring these 5 new engineers is going to be really important to do in order to maintain that accuracy. So quick 4-step approach. Firstly, come with a baseline for your current organization. Make sure you know who's in your organization, what roles they hold, the seniority levels, and an overall cost structure. That's going to be really important for HR, business, and finance to talk to each other. Second, model a few scenarios. So maybe you're coming up with this example scenario we used here where you say, okay, we think we need to launch a new product 12 months from now. This is what we need to do. Maybe you then come up with a scenario where actually we don't need to launch a new product. We need to improve the product that already exists. And that's a second baseline scenario. Third baseline scenario maybe is we actually don't know what's going to come, but we think there are 3 potential product lines that we want to launch. So maybe we want to build an MVP in these 3 areas. That's going to change all your baseline assumptions. But with these different scenarios in place, you can create all these different models. It's very easy to do in spreadsheets or in different tools. And then if assumptions change on the way, you've already gone through the thought process in order to get there. Make sure you stress test the organizational design. So once you have these headcount plans in place, take a look at what we call spans and layers analysis. How many direct reports does each manager have? How senior are those managers? How senior are the direct reports? Basically, what kind of problems are you likely to see when you implement something like this, and how can you overcome them? And then finally, don't just stop once the plan is in place. Refresh it at least quarterly, but ideally each month. When you're looking back at what's happened from the previous month, see, okay, was attrition more or less than expected? Did we meet our hiring goals? Are the costs actually in line with what we expected, or do we have to pay more because of market changes? So all these kind of constant refreshes creates agile planning structure, which is going to mean that you're much less likely to be surprised by something further down the road that's going to cause you to do something like a huge restructuring that's going to really impact the business. Just as a quick preview, we do have some videos on how to do all of this on the channel. I am also working on a product. So if this is something that you feel like is going to be needed, you'll find my connection details in the comments below. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. Very happy to talk through and make sure I capture your requirements. But this is a problem that I think can be solved with spreadsheets or with tools, depending on your appetite. So I'm very excited to learn more about what you may be seeing there. And that's pretty much it. Let me know how you get on with this. If you've already implemented something similar, it would be great to hear about it in the comments below, because we're always curious to know what different people are doing, how people are solving these problems. Take care, and we'll see you soon.